Welcome to Word of the Day.
Impartial and just.
I believe that this could change.
Also an illustrator.
I had a poem I wanted to share.
Join me today for the poem of the day.
Aggressive action against a place or enemy force.
Today's word of the day is test.
My favorite character that I have written.
What motivates me to create?
Hunger is seriously one of my favorite poems I think I've
I'm
ever
working
written.
so hard to build this magazine and bring it to you guys. This is the Guilded Periodically Podcast, brought to you by the Fiction Forge.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Guilded Periodically Podcast. I'm your host, Hues, and it's another solo episode. We'll be talking about the article, Black Speculative Fiction, Using Words to Transcend Oppression, which is the article that I posted that is actually a comparison between Samuel Delaney's Babel 17 and Octavia Butler's Mind of My Mind, a comparative essay between these two novels that came out in similar times, that talk about similar subjects, but in very different ways, and how they actually represent the interconnectedness of communities and the strength of using the oppressor's language against them. So I do think it's really important to note that I wrote this whenever I was in college, my undergrad, and I don't know what I was on. I think I was on some like future prediction shit a little bit, because telepathy as a concept is hyper popular right now. So this article was written in like 2021, which yes, was like during COVID, but it was before we had the age of Aquarius and this like huge technological psychic phenomena, like gold rush that we're having right now. Everyone wants to be a spiritualist. Everyone wants to be a psychic, but nobody wants to talk about why being a spiritualist and a psychic, especially a Black spiritualist and psychic, is so important whenever it comes to taking down the motherfucking system and making the changes that are necessary. So I'm going to dive into the article a little bit, or at least some of the subjects that I think are really important, or the topics within the article that I think are really important. And then I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about using the oppressor's language against them, and the oppressor's tools against them. So first, I want to talk about how Babel 17, Mind of My Mind, completely different plots. They are completely different plots. Mind of My Mind is the first book in the Pattern Master series. It actually might be the second book in the Pattern Master series by Octavia Butler, and it follows these this group of telepaths that were created with eugenics by this character called Doro. Doro is gross. I'll just leave it there. Doro is gross. He's like the grossest. Well, he's not the grossest man alive. That's Hog from Samuel Delaney's book Hog, but he's a pretty gross man. He's very self-centered. He's very patriarchal. He makes a lot of decisions that I don't necessarily agree with, but the main thing is that he sows his seeds and uses them to grow telepaths, essentially. We meet Mary, who is Doro's daughter, but also like lover. Little love stuff happening there, which is a little awkward for everybody involved, if you ask me. As she transfigures from a latent psychic to an active psychic, they go through like a hatching type situation that happens where Mary like telepathic abilities awaken, and she has more control over them. And when that happens, she becomes very dangerous. Doro's suddenly afraid of her. But in Babel 17, we actually follow our like Asian American protagonist. She might not be American. I take that part back. Rydra, who is a telepath, but is also a linguistics expert. She gets like commissioned by this like space station to basically translate this like language of war called Babel 17, crack it, change it, and make it like an anti-weapon for the people that are using it. It's like an earworm. So whenever Babel 17 gets into you, it like reprograms your brain, which like, sounds a lot like subliminal messaging, right? So Rydra, our beautiful, amazing savant, who I genuinely believe is autistic, but that's a completely different episode, goes through some very interesting transformations, okay? We find out that she's like, used to be a part of a polycule. She lost like her ex. We also see her manipulate a general at the beginning, using his thoughts about her to her advantage. But then we see her later on meet this character called the Butcher, who like totally shipped them. Total love that. Butcher, my bae. But when they meet, she realizes that like he can do kind of like what she does. And so they're able to like have this nice little push and pull where he can see what she's thinking and she can see what he's thinking. And they have like this beautiful like little mind meld that happens. In both of these stories, without giving too much away of the plot, we see women step into a position of power due to their latent ability to mind read. And so something I think is really interesting is that women, especially women of color, are expected to already know what the men or their partners want. We're trained, right? I'm not, like I've mentioned before, I consider myself non-binary, but I was raised as a female and raised as a woman. So I do feel like I have a right to talk about this a little bit, about these concepts of like how we are raised to predict. We are raised to predict what our man wants. We're raised to predict what our father wants, what our mother wants, what our brothers want, like what is expected of us. We walk into a room and scan to see what what unseen labor needs to be done. Like something that happens a lot is like, you know, at Thanksgiving, whenever you guys go to your parents' house to celebrate the colonization of America, and then all of the women walk in and you see them just go to the kitchen and ask what needs to be done, or just pick up what needs to be done. Oh, these potatoes need mashing, these potatoes need peeling. They'll just go in wordless. But there's all the men sitting there like doing nothing. And I don't mean to be rude by saying that, but they are doing nothing. They're not doing anything to forward the event. Like maybe they set the grill up, maybe they cooked the turkey, maybe they carved it. Most of them are watching football or fondling themselves though. So let's be real. So it's really interesting to me because we have these women who are in positions of power who are being expected to do this like labor with the unseen, right? The telepath. Like they are the matriarchs. They're the ones that are like rearing and raising the children for the future. While men like to think that they are the reason why we have children in the future, they aren't the ones raising them. Most of the time, like fathers are absent, like fathers aren't there. They're working or they don't want to have anything to do with their children. And this has a lot to do with the fact that there's not a lot of strong male representation, both in media and in like real life where men are fully committed, but that doesn't mean that they aren't. But in this particular article, what I unpack is the fact that these women, as the matriarchs, as the mothers, are the only ones that can properly utilize the telepathic language to make the systemic changes that need to be done. So within these narratives, the concept of language and telepathy as a language is very prominent. The idea that being able to read someone's mind is a language of its own is incredibly prominent in this. So if you're someone who can read someone's mind, and that means you have the tools, right, to be able to predict, to be able to see what the person in power wants from you, that makes it very easy to get what you want out of the person in power. So as people who have been oppressed, especially women in BIPOC communities who have been oppressed by capitalism, by patriarchy, by white colonization, something that is very important to note is that you do have the power, and you should take the language, the skills, and the determination that the systems that be are using to oppress you. Take those, become like them, understand them, and then use it against them. Because what the fuck are they going to do when you got to where they are by following the rules that they set? They're going to say you don't deserve to be there. They might, but then you can point back to the fact that you're using the same system as them to get where you're going, to say it is fair, because it's not. You're not a diversity hire. You are someone who's incredibly intelligent, you're educated, and you've done the work. So within the context of this article, we discuss how it's really important, and honestly, unfortunately, on the weight, like the weight is on the shoulders of feminine people, women, female presenting people, to take these weapons that have been used to oppress us and use them against the oppressors. This is not just language, like using the N-word, for example, or describing someone derogatorily. This isn't just like saying like, oh, I'm broke, stop using those things. We're talking about using the linguistic challenges, the way, the intonation that they speak to you, to take that back. They're speaking to you condescendingly, speak condescendingly back to them, but do so in a way that subverts what they are doing. You're not condescending to them because you believe that you're better than them. You're condescending to them because they believe that you're better than, like that they believe that they're better than you, using that skill back at them. So that's really what I unpack in this article, is talking about how women are the systems of power, like women should be in control of the systems of power, that women are the ones that have to overthrow and change the system of power, and that men should just get the fuck out of the way and allow the mothers of the future to shape the future in a way that's actually safe for our children by overtaking the oppressive government, the oppressive systems that be capitalism, patriarchy, white colonization. Just step out the way and let the women who have already been doing all the unseen labor and predicting just take over and like control that shit. And that's basically what I talk about in this article. It's really relevant to the idea of taking because with this huge like push that's happening whenever it comes to like using witchcraft, using magic, manipulation, and being a psychic, I do think it's really important that when we look at telepathy as a language, as a tool, what are we using it for? So you want all these psychic abilities. You want to be an empath. You want to be a psychic. You want to be a little witch. You want to be a little tarot reader on the internet. What are you using that for? Are you using it to actually change the systems that have been oppressing you, that are oppressing others? Or are you just wanting to learn these things because it's like trending right now? Because like being spiritual's in. Because at the end of the day, the reason why people used to, and for the most part still do, go on these spiritual journeys of self are to find a way to get out of the chains of oppression. And this is on any level, because men are also oppressed by the patriarchy as well. Men are looking towards women to find out how to be more like women, how to be more like women so that they can like be more nurturing instead of the destruction oriented mindsets that they've been ingrained with. So something that's important to note is that when it comes to the concept of telepathy as a language, it is a language of brainwashing. It's a language programming. So Samuel Delaney and Octavia Butler, when they're speculating about women having telepathy and being able to build a whole new world, a whole new future out of it, they're not just talking about, oh, let me control these people. They're instead saying, let me change their programming. Let me change their subconscious. Let me change their DNA and change the DNA for the future so that we are no longer naturally being programmed to be destructive humans, but instead community-oriented humans that want to support one another. And so that's really what I talk about in this article. And a lot of it is inspired by obviously the books and my love of Black speculative fiction, while also recognizing that when you use magical rhetoric like telepathy in mundane novels, not fantasy novels, but in regular novels that are just speculating or being playful, that there is some truth to that, because there are spiritual practices that do utilize the rhetoric that is being also quoted in these books. So there are people out there who spiritually believe that they are telepathic, and many of them actually are. So if you're a telepath and you're watching this, what are you using your telepathy for? Is it just so that you can get a little extra money or get your boss to listen to you? Or have you thought about maybe going to a local town meeting or to like interview your congressman and using it there to help change their subconscious programming? And whether or not you believe telepathy is real, I think that that's something that you can speculate on. If you could change somebody's mind with yours without speaking, just by locking eyes and sharing souls, if you could change an oppressor into an abolitionist, would you? Anyway, I'm Hues. This is the Guilded Periodically Podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
This has been the Guilded Periodically Podcast, brought to you by The Fiction Forge.